So good day, everyone. Today for our discussion, I thought I would just go through some basic IP due diligence stuff just to make sure that everybody understands what services the Eclipse Foundation provides and how to engage with them. Along with a couple of just concepts that are that I think are important. Those of you that were at EclipseCon will recognize some of my slides, but there is a lot of new content here. Before I get to that, just remind everybody that we're doing this committer badges thing through an organization called Credly. At some point, we are going to start sending out invitations to this, and I would just don't want anybody to be surprised when they get something from Credly or wonder what the heck this thing is. Just FYI that this is something that will be coming in the next, likely in the next short while for some of you. It's important that I point out that, of course, some of what I'm going to be saying today might be regarded as legal advice. I am not a lawyer. I do not give legal advice. And please do not at any point in any conversation with anybody regarding legal matters use the phrase, but Wayne said. That would be greatly appreciated. Intellectual property is basically works of the mind. The short version of this is that the content that you produce for your Eclipse projects, be it code, be it documentation, be it in ASCII doc format or in Java source or JavaScript source or whatever, is all something that is considered intellectual property. There's lots of different grayness in terms of how intellectual property is copyrighted and licensing and whatnot. But again, fundamentally, it's all intellectual property. And I will remind everybody that we are in the business of risk mitigation. There is no such thing as the elimination of risk. Even in a very high detail, very deep analysis, there's no such thing as absolute elimination of risk. There's always some amount of risk. Our due diligence process is focused on determining basically determining licenses of content and making sure that we make that information available to people who are downstream so that they can use that to make their own decisions. Ultimately, the Eclipse Foundation, we do our best to determine whether or not various licenses and various content are compatible together. But what constitutes whether or not something is compatible is variable. It really depends on the lawyers, and it's one of and the risk profile of an organization, and then that sort of thing. The idea is if you want legal advice, you need to talk to your own company lawyer. We do our best to identify. I'll just remind everybody that as Eclipse committers, we need you to be pushing content into the public repository that's maintained by the Eclipse Foundation on behalf of the project and community, rather than working behind, quote unquote, behind the firewall. When you work outside of that public repository, when you spend a significant amount of time between pushes of new content, it just makes it harder and harder for others to participate. And a big part of what we do here is about vendor neutrality, and vendor neutrality means operating in an open and transparent manner. In order to operate in an open and transparent manner, it must be possible for people to show up and be able to understand the current state of the code and make contributions based on that current state. When a project team disappears for weeks or months and periodically throws content over the wall into the public repository, it's basically impossible for anybody else to participate in that project. So again, please, just as a matter of practice, follow the GitHub, follow the GitLab development practices. You build your fork, you do your work in your fork, you merge content from your fork into the main repository, either as a committer, you can do it directly, or as a or perhaps through a pull request if that's what the team's values are. But again, follow that practice, and again, merge your updates as frequently as you can. You know, basically follow a natural agile process of some form. Keeping the repository up to date and as current as possible is, again, critical. We employ something, and there's a couple of different variations of the name, symmetrical or inbound, outbound licensing. The idea here is that people who contribute to our projects retain ownership of their contributions. So I have a contributor over here on the left. They're forming some kind of contribution in the form of a pull request perhaps to your repository. They are the author of that content. Chances are it's either they who own the copyright of it, or possibly their employer, or some, under some contract, it may be somebody else. But the idea is whoever holds the copyright of the content, when they contribute to your project, they are contributing that content under a license. They are granting us permission to use their contribution. And then we, in turn, make that contribution available to everybody else under the same licensing terms. So generally, those licensing terms are the project license. There are exceptions in some cases, depending on the license. Some projects have some repositories or some content that's under different licenses. But whatever the terms of that they contribute under is the terms that we distribute under. And they retain their ownership of that content, or again, probably their employer. As part of this, our repositories have things like a contributing file. And if you look at the template that we provide for a contributing file, there is a reference in there to the ECA, which describes that and provides a pointer for that, and information about the DCO is all accessible from that. There's also a reference to our terms of use. These are important legal documents, legal hooks that make sure that we have the necessary rights to again distribute the content under the terms that it has been contributed. When you do receive contributions, as we've mentioned numerous times, and I'm pretty sure everyone is comfortable with, we need to make sure that the individual who is making the contribution has signed the ECA. Now, the ECA is, we have a checker that gets put on automatically. We do automatically check that for you. In cases where a pull request may have multiple commits with it, we actually check the ECA checker checks each of the individual commits. So when you get a rejection, it may be that one of the commits may be from an author that's not signed the ECA. It also requires that, actually, I can't remember if this is actually true. The person who's actually contributing, pushing the commit, or making the pull request actually has to be the person who's indicated as the author. I think that's true. I'm pretty sure that's true. Anyway, please make sure, it would be great if you could push back when somebody puts their name as Bugs Bunny and some silly email address. It would be great if we could have real names there. But ultimately, everything that we have there is traced back to an ECA, and that ECA is basically a legal document that the contributor is signing, indicating that they understand the terms under which they are contributing. The terms are basically the DCO. The DCO is the standard Linux DCO. When somebody contributes something, they are attesting that they have authored the content or have the necessary permissions to contribute that content. They have the necessary rights. They're providing it under the terms of the license. Again, generally the project license, but there's sometimes there's differences. Again, if you have content that's under different licenses, then there might be different license terms. If somebody wants to contribute something under license terms that are different from your project license terms and you're not sure what to do, you can contact the IP team, emo-ip-team@eclipse.org, and we can help just by email, or you can create an issue. Create an issue on the help desk, and we'll find it, or email. There's lots of different ways to connect with us. And this is another one, an important one, is contributions are public. We do not accept anonymous contributions. We cannot. Even, a couple of words here, a tweak in documentation, we still really need to know the identity, and we need to be able to, the pull requests, or sorry, commit records are forever. There is with GDPR, there's this right to be forgotten, which is a wonderful thing. We do not remove identification information. We do not remove email addresses from Git commits. That's just not something that's possible. We have a business requirement to keep this information. And so this is entirely consistent with GDPR. Thank you so much, Boris, for managing the people coming in. That's very helpful. Thank you. We also have some committer agreements. Committer agreements wrap that DCO as well, and make sure that the contributions coming from our committers come to us with the necessary sets of permissions, and make sure that we have all of the necessary legal information in place. Again, these are legal agreements that either committers sign as individuals, or as a convenience to our member companies, we have this notion of a member committer and contributor agreement, which provides a so a means of having all of the employees of a single member company covered by a single agreement. To make the contributor part work, we need the individual, your colleagues who might be covered by this agreement need to tell us their employer in their account. We don't do any kind of automatic association based on email addresses or not. We've actually got an issue open for that, which would be a nice addition. But if you have a colleague who is contributing to an Eclipse project that is not themselves an Eclipse committer, they need to go to accounts.eclipse.org, log in, and tell us who they work for, and then based on that, they're just good to go. It's never wrong to just sign the ECA, but there's no requirement to do so. I've highlighted a chunk of the individual committer agreement. The same text is in the member committer agreement as well. By signing this agreement, you are basically agreeing to comply to the bylaws and implement the various processes that we describe. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about I'm going to talk only a little bit about the Dash license tool. We have lots of documentation for this. We have numerous presentations on this. The Dash license tool is, well, frankly, it's far more successful than I dared dream that it would be. We have 100 projects are using it to actually create review requests. I assume that more are actually using it to do reviews. There is a feature built into it by which, if it detects content for which it cannot figure out the license, it will automatically create a record in our IP lab, which IP lab is a GitLab repository. So it will create an issue in our IP lab to request that our IP team review it. And again, this is all automatically. And then, of course, on the back end, there is some automation which is able to, about 80% of the time, it's like 79 or 79.8 or something. It's effectively 80% of the time we're able to automatically review and approve content. So the idea is we're looking at the license, trying to determine what the license of the content is, and whether or not we believe it is generally compatible with the project license. So anyway, so this, again, there's some automation here. If you haven't investigated it, I invite you to. The project is currently at github.com/eclipse/dash licenses. The URL's at the bottom there. We're likely going to move it to, we have a new GitHub organization called Eclipse -dash. So we are going to, we're going to probably move it there, but GitHub will automatically redirect. So we actually have a handful of projects are invoking the dash license tool as part of their builds. I'm aware of 10 projects doing this as part of their Maven builds. So the idea, yeah, so there is some documentation on the website on how to do this. This is really a project decision. If the project team wants to add license checking to their automated builds, their Jenkins-based builds are certainly easy to do. This is something that we can help you with. Yes. Yeah, and so again, we have some projects that do this, and just basically every once in a while we have a handful of requests for reviews show up in IP Lab that were put there by bots. We only allow committers to use our IP Lab, or bot accounts that were created by our IP team. Anything else that's put into IP Lab that either is not from a committer or not one of those bots just gets ignored. Well, we close it. We don't ignore it. We just close it. We don't review it. We don't engage. We don't put any. We can't put any resources towards it, unfortunately. But anyway, yeah. So we can sort you out if you have a project that you want to add this as part of your builds, and then we can help you. Contact EMO. EMO can point you in the right direction, or just open a help desk issue and we can help you out. First step though is go and look at the dash license tool and make sure you can make it run on your project. If you have a funky Maven build, that may be something, then there may be some requirements for that. I should note that the dash license tool, we do have a Maven plugin, and the Maven plugin does, by all observation, a fantastic job. The Maven plugin only knows what the Maven dependency resolver knows. So if you do funky things in your build, like go and grab a jar file and pull a jar file apart and grab pieces of it and shove it into your build, the Maven dependency resolver won't know that's happening. So in those cases, we would need your help to engage, and I'll talk a little bit about manually engaging in this IP process. We might need you to manually engage with us to make sure that, again, those funky things are dealt with. We're particularly good at Maven, but the dash license tool was actually built so that it will work with basically any technology that has a package manager. If you have a means of getting a list of dependencies, and this could be a requirements.txt file from Python This could be a package lock file from NPM, or a yarn lock file. It could be a Go sum file. If you have some way of getting a list of dependencies, then the Dash license tool can probably help you. If you have a technology that you're using that we don't currently have a good answer for, we would love to work with you to try and figure out how to come up with an answer for that. Our answer for Gradle is a little bit sketchy right now, but we have I have a committer who's engaging with us to try and make that better and easier. So IP Lab is, like I said, it's a GitLab instance. It's mostly a repository, an issue tracker from your perspective, but it actually, the repository contains our curated license information. So the automation actually updates the contents of the repository as it's working through the issues. Your process is to use the Dash license tool to create issues. The backend basically is continuously monitoring for new issues. When it finds a new issue, it grabs it from the information provided. It finds, downloads, and decompresses the source code. It uses a product called Scan Code Toolkit, open source, lovely stuff by our good friends over at NextB. Runs scan code on it, analyzes the results that scan code produces, and approves or marks for manual review. One of the things that you can do to make this better and easier for us, and for, frankly, for everybody else in the world, is to actually use things like SPDX license identifiers in content. If you are producing, so we actually I had somebody come to me and say, they maintain a project that is actually consumed as third-party content by the Eclipse, by an Eclipse project, and they wanted to know how to pass our license checker more easily. And the answer is, put good license information into your headers. So again, this is one of the things, we've been doing this for years. Our templates all include SPDX license identifiers. This just makes it easier for everybody. People who are using our content, when they have that information, it makes it so much easier for them. And again, when third-party content, when other projects do this for us, it makes it so much easier for us. In cases where we are not able to get a satisfactory result from this automation, the IP team kicks into effect, and they use tools like Fossology. They have an arsenal of tools at their disposal. Fossology is our main tool that we use. Fossology is entirely an IP analyst tool in our world. We don't make that available publicly, just mostly because it's not a great tool for people who aren't IP analysts. Do we have to put SPDX license identifiers in every single text-based file? As much as possible. Now, there are some text formats, text files, JSON files, for example, where there is no commenting format, so it's not possible to do that. So please put SPDX license identifiers in all of the contents that support it, and of course, license, like proper full headers in any kind of content that supports that notion. We don't require this today, but to give adopters the most comprehensive snapshot of the license state of your project, there is something called reuse.software. We use it on our projects. And the idea is reuse.software provides a means by which you can provide license information for everything. So files that do support an ability to insert comments, you would just put a license header with an SPDX license identifier in the file. So that's like Java, source files, that sort of thing. Other files, there is either a single file that you can create that says, here is the license information for all the other random files in my directory. Or you can add these .license files next to things. So you'll see some directories, you'll see some repositories where there'll be a something.jpg, and then next to it there's a something.jpg.license. Anyway, so reuse.software is something we recommend. We don't require, but it's again, we're big fans. Actually, I probably should do a whole. I'll make reuse be a topic of a future office hours session, because I quite like what they do. The dash license tool basically takes the identifier. So we use these identifiers in a format, in a clearly defined format. Some time ago, we decided that using clearly defined was turns out to have not been the right solution. We're probably going to, at some point, switch this over to using package URL, but we'll make sure that we provide proper education for that. But for now, we are using clearly defined identifiers for content. From that, we are able to find the source most of the time. So for example, this clearly defined ID references something from BND, which is a OSGI build tool. And from that, we're able to identify the source of content. With that source, we download it, extract it, scan it, come up with some conclusions about it. In cases where we can't find the source code, or we need to, or you need to do a manual review. So if you need to create an issue, if you go to, and there's a link at the bottom, gitlab.eclipse.org/eclipse-foundation/emo-team/IP-lab. And that link is documented in the handbook and in a number of different locations. If you go there, there is instructions for how to create a review request issue in IP-lab. Again, most of the time, you're just letting the dash license tool do this. But if you need to manually create one, this is what we need. We need a five-part title on the issue. The 5-part in a clearly defined ID format. Again, probably going to change this to package URL at some point, but right now that's what we do. If it's project code, if say you need to do some content needs to be reviewed as part of a contribution. In this case, I'm specifying what might be a pull request on a particular repository in the dash license project. The body of the issue we need to know what project this is for. And this is the style here, project, we look for this pattern here. It's really, this is the pattern that we're looking for when we're trying to figure out what the project is for a particular review request. This is basically the project's PMI link. Then if this is specified in a format we understand, and I can talk about that another time, again, the dash license tool automatically puts this in a format we understand. You can override the whole source finding algorithm by just telling us where the source is. So in this case, I've got a body of a IP lab issue, and I'm saying that this particular zip archive contains the source. I actually took these examples from 2 different things. The example of the title and the example of the body are unrelated, which may have been a mistake. But anyway, we need, again, if you want to override the automatic source finding and tell us very specifically where the source is, then this is the format we're looking for. We can make sense of a zip archive or or archives in other formats. See you later, Jen. And we can make sense. We can actually make sense of patch files and a Java file, like an individual source file. We can make sense of all of those sorts of things. So a URL pointing to something, presumably something durable, ideally like a Maven Central source archive is great. A GitHub release, a zip from a specific GitHub release is fine. You can also drag and drop attachments onto IP Lab, and we can make sense of those. I have, there's a number of examples of this sort of thing in the handbook and how we deal with them. You can give us a merge request or a pull request. If you give us the URL for a pull request, we can figure out where the patch file is and scan that. So these are, again, these are the formats we support. As we discover new ways to do it, and we add them. Again, this comprehensive list is in the well, sorry, I've got an update to the handbook which will contain this. That should be in the handbook shortly. So, for example, at the bottom here, I have a pull request that's been received by the Dash project, and I give it the URL of that pull request, and the Dash license tool, the automation should be able to know what to do, figure out what to do with it. While I have your attention, just talk a little bit about SBOMs. We've got a bunch of projects that are have already started updating their build scripts to include the generation of SBOMs, and here they are now. One of the interesting things, at least for me, is the EE4J top level project updated their parent POM, and now basically all of Jakarta and all of EE4J is set up to build SBOMs, which is great. We've been getting really good, what we believe to be really good results using the Cyclone DX plugin for Maven. And we've had a smaller number, but we've been seeing some success with the NPM module for Cyclone DX, and just automatic generation of these. We do have a process that walks through all of our project repositories. It looks in just the default branch, looks for POM files and package lock files and those sorts of things, and digs in to find out what they're doing. And so we are automatically detecting when projects add this, so you don't need to necessarily tell us, but it would be great if you did tell us that you're working with SBOMs and share your experience. I think I have a URL in a minute to where we want you to share that experience, and of course I will include that information when I post the video. The best things that we can all be doing right now to prepare for the wonderful world of SBOMs is to ensure that our metadata is as accurate as possible. Specify license data at for your modules using an SPDX identifier. A lot of what we've observed anyway, like Maven now, they recommend in your POM file that you use an SPDX expression for your license, which is great because that's what we want you to do too. Similarly, I don't think the NPM, I don't think that they recommend an SPDX identifier, but I've observed that that's commonly used. And again, that aligns very nicely with what we would like you to do, so please do that. If you have any questions about what these should look like, EMO IP team at eclipse.org can help, or just EMO. Just as an example, in a Maven POM file specifying the license as a single entry, it's common practice to have, in a case where your project is dual licensed, have multiple license entries. That actually is confusing. It's not entirely clear that it means you can pick either license or that you have to agree to the terms of both. In this case, using SPDX unambiguously describes the license. I can, in this particular case, either consume the content under the EPL or the GPL with class path exception, right? SPDX language for specifying licenses is well defined. Adding Cyclone DX to your Maven build, relatively straightforward. add a plugin into your plugin section, and then magic happens. It generates the SBOM. The SBOM winds up being an artifact that's propagated along with the project. We've observed certainly a number of Apache projects are doing this already. Again, super easy. If you could start doing it, if you haven't already investigated it, if you could look at it, this would be great. There are instructions, and again, I will include this link in the notes. On GitLab, under the Eclipse Foundation banner, we have the EMO team has an SBOM repository, and again, in there is instructions for how to do this. They are basically this with some supporting text. That's basically all I wanted to talk about today. And I will leave with the parting thought or advice that, or reminder, I am not a lawyer. And anything I gave you, anything I said today should not be taken as legal advice. With that, I'm going to stop the recording, and I welcome your questions.